And we are back again with another episode of the Artisans of the Horizon. And I have a very good friend of mine here, the Reverend Judy Shook. And I would like to begin, before I give my usual prompt, I would like to begin with a quote that I just absolutely love. And it's from one of my favorite historical people in the whole world, Keith Haring, who was an American artist and AIDS activist who died from complications of AIDS as well. And he was one of the innovators of pop art, and particularly in democratizing art as a way of trying to take it from being such an elitist thing that only people who had money could afford to go see, and putting it out into the public forum, quite literally by going and painting and drawing in the subways. So here's what he has to say. Part of growing is trying to teach yourself to be empty enough that the thing can come through you completely, so it's not affected by your preconceived ideas of what a work of art should be or what an artist should do. I'm going to read it again. Part of growing is trying to teach yourself to be empty enough that the thing can come through you completely, so it's not affected by your preconceived ideas of what a work of art should be or what an artist should do. I love that because I love this idea of being empty enough. I think part of being an artist, particularly an artist of the horizon, is about being available to the experience that's right in front of you. Being here in the moment, and not worried about qualifications or designations or whether or not you actually know that you can do this. All that it asks is that you be there with it and allow it um, to shape you into whatever needs to happen. So part of being an artisan of the horizon is knowing that you're the artisan, but it's also knowing that you are the horizon. So you're creating it and it's creating you. And part of that I do think is some emptiness, allowing for some emptiness to take place so that there's more spaciousness and things like that. So along the lines of, Judy, of your work and your life, because you certainly are an artisan in many, many ways, how do you feel like you are painting the horizon and the horizon's being painted, you are being painted as the horizon?
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, I love the quote and the whole concept you have of artisans of the horizon. Um, I have been doing a practice using improvisational song, dance, and storytelling, InterPlay, since 1994. And so working incrementally and using the wisdom of the body, and really it's heart, mind, body, spirit, getting in touch with yourself and what's going on for you yourself, and just trusting that is really an essential life practice for me. And that is, InterPlay is I think it's on 6 continents now. I don't know, it's in so many places around the world, but it has really been life transforming to me. It's the kind of thing that all the people who say they can't sing or they can't dance or they can't tell a story find, no, there's permission. You have that within you to, and it calls that forth. Just walking is a dance. Even pausing, even witnessing is being a part of a dance. And to stretch our concepts of what dance and singing and storytelling and even tactile arts are, I just love that. Yeah.
Yeah, and you said something that I remember the first time I heard you said it, I thought, wow, I cannot believe I never thought about that. And you said that the body has wisdom.
Oh, yes.
And
Yeah.
I just love that. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, the actual term body wisdom is something I did also pick up from InterPlay. Um, but I think it's come to me certainly in other ways. Like a lot of people in our general US, I know we're a country with lots of different cultures, but we have certain aspects of sort of the Western world in most parts of our society that we're not always in touch with our body, you know, and I think that that's probably true of humans around the world, are not encouraged to be in touch with our body unless we're still living in indigenous communities.
Mm-hmm.
Or unless we're just blessed to be in families and settings that are in touch with their bodies. But a lot of us lose touch with our bodies and really stop paying attention to all those sensations and the information that helps us to stay safe and healthy, also helps us to stay connected with one another, and we're aware of the connections we always have, whether we're aware of them or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that part of it is what really was struck me, because I think especially what the last part of what you just said about it helps us stay safe and it helps us to stay healthy. I think it's a beautiful reminder that um, we have already the tools that we need, the paint brushes, the hammer, the nails, to create what is needs to be created. You know, it's not about again, it's not about being qualified. It's about really more having a curiosity,
Hmm.
that they're having a willingness to investigate, to explore, to dive into the the expansiveness of what it means to be human, um,
Hmm.
and to trust that we're more powerful and expansive than we realize. Um,
Yeah, just being present and showing up is a huge act that is creating the horizon. So, for instance, you know, people that are showing up in the streets protesting concerns about Black Lives Matter, and people that are protesting and putting themselves out there for the environment, to address the ecological crisis that we're in. Um, that is an art as well. Whatever we're creating, you know, as you've defined this artisans on the horizon, we're all creating now. We're all, and of course, you and I have both studied some of Matthew Fox, and I know that you've interviewed him in this series, and his
mhm.
teachings that we're all artisans, you know, we're all prophets. And I absolutely agree with that totally. I have led artist way groups, and that was back in the 90s. I was leading artist way groups and my own kind of art and soul retreats and classes as well, helping people to get in touch just with base kinds of art practices.
Mm.
Yeah, just and not teaching technique at all, just using exercises to free ourselves from those obstacles, to free ourselves with the messages saying, I can't draw, I can't sing, I can't dance, you know, I can't. And then to be, as you know, you talked about the emptiness, then to be empty enough just to do that, to
Mhm.
take the crayon and scribble, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have learned um, that I'm one of those people that if I do something, I have to first kind of fiddle around a little bit before I actually can get into a rhythm that allows me to do what I'm trying to do.
Hmm.
Um, so, like, if I'm gonna draw, I have to first just take my pencil and just draw a few lines. I have no
Mm-hmm.
real like purpose other than the fact that I'm just drawing them. Um, because it's almost like you're charging yourself up a little bit. You know, you're
Mm-hmm.
exercising those muscles, and I think we don't give ourselves enough permission to be procedural like that, to have a process.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, you talk about that, and I can almost see one of those little kids' toys where you go vroom, vroom, and then it goes.
yeah,
I can kind of get that, yeah. And it reminds me of working with clay and doing sculpting and just getting that going and kind of making some patterns or textures, somehow. Even just the processing of working the clay before you even start to form it warms up the body, warms up the senses, connects us. That heart, mind, body, spirit connection. And then whatever comes forth can come forth. And of course, like, I guess it was Michelangelo or somebody that talked about his sculptures come forth from the marble itself, So I've certainly found that with the clay work, that it just comes forth from my relationship with the clay.
yeah, absolutely. And I do think it was Michelangelo. I think it's that funny story that he would go every day and look at the block of marble and
Hmm.
just stare at it, and then he'd go home, and then he'd go do it again. And finally, the people were like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I'm working." And then I think like after a week or something, he started chiseling away at it. And they were like, "Well, finally you're doing something." But it was a part of his process. They didn't realize that he was envisioning and projecting onto the marble what he was trying to create. And yeah, and I agree with you. We're both a part of the creation spirituality tradition, and we are taught in that tradition that everyone's a prophet, everyone's an artist, everyone's a mystic. And
Mm-hmm.
the creation spirituality tradition is really about being a tactile, tangible, practical mystic. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think really um, that's what we need right now in our world. We need people who are willing to not rearrange chairs on the Titanic, but be like, hey, here's a life raft, catch it,
Yeah.
and say there's something more beyond the Titanic, uh, you
Yeah.
know. So, and I really feel like this show that I've been doing, this series. I was just looking back at it earlier today, and I was thinking, this is kind of like an archive of magic,
Hmm.
of magical people, because every one of these episodes I've done have all been uh, different. I use the same prompt, and I get totally different messages from everybody, but they all cast this big, beautiful spell of just awesomeness. And yeah. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I think that's what it takes. When we're talking about the literal horizon, where I am, I can only see a portion of it. And even if you're next to me, your portion is going to be a little different, but if you're socially distanced, you're going to have even a different view of the horizon, and here you are in Texas and here I am in Asheville, North Carolina. So we definitely have different views of the horizon.
Mhm.
And so, but it's all the horizon. It's all the horizon. So we need the different perspectives on it in order to create it. We need to, just like we need to hear the different voices, we need to have the different cultures, we need to have the different perspectives.
Well,
Yeah.
that's part of the reason why I chose to call the series Artisans, plural, of the Horizon, because I
Mhm.
really don't think we can, if there's anything beyond the horizon, which I believe there's a lot beyond the horizon. um, One of the things that I think that's beyond it is a way of being human that recognizes interdependence.
Mhm.
And I think CS really teaches us that, not just interdependence upon other human beings, but for all of creation, the cosmos.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. We have unavoidable connections, and of course, our most of our spiritual traditions, at their deepest core, are saying that we have those unavoidable connections and unity. And now science has been saying, at least new science has been saying, postmodern science has been saying, how we are unavoidably connected. And so our ideas of being individuals without that connection are really very limited, very short time in history that anyone, and probably a short scope of types of people, and certain people within certain cultures would only see that limit. Otherwise, people have been seeing the connection and experiencing connection all along. And we have to have that. It's unavoidable. Like, we're totally seeing it with this pandemic, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're connected whether we like it or not.
Yes, ironically, you know, because we're supposed to be distant from each other.
Right, yeah. So we're distant from each other, but you know, you and I are having a conversation over the internet, over the miles. And of course, all
Yeah.
these people have been doing this wonderful music and craft and dancing and singing, and so many incredible talents coming out shared where people are doing this online. So thank you for initiating this part, these conversations.
Well, I so appreciate your willingness to participate in, and also being a part of that, you know, that creative energy, that creative flow. I certainly think that Spirit is really up to some awesome things, and uh, you know, and I think one of those things that we need to claim as spiritual people, but as a human species, is the fact that Gaia will always win.
Mm.
At the end of the day, Gaia will always win, and we're being kind of forced into realizing that. I think what my friend Reverend Felicia Perez-Ader in LA um, did this series with me, and she brought up the point that I thought was very good, that she believes the horizon will be more of the divine feminine,
Mm.
the
Hmm.
goddess coming forth in a more um, uh, kind of like in the spiritual Me Too kind of sense. Um, you
That
know,
makes a lot of sense. As well as, I don't know exactly what you mean by in the Gaia connection, but how I understand that is even sort of a Gaia theory perception that everything in creation is as if it's one being. And so we live on the skin of Gaia, and we
mhm.
are a part of Gaia. Um, you know, am I a flea? I don't know. Or am I an eyelash? You know, or a toenail that's going to be clipped off? I don't know. You know, what part am I? Um, that interwoven, interbeing one, and as Christians, you and I are both Christians, that body of Christ, like we are all
Mhm.
connected, and we may be this little microorganism part of that body, but it's unavoidable connection. Yeah.
Yeah, and what I mean by the Gaia part is is you illustrated it perfectly, actually. Is the fact that, yeah, we are on Gaia's skin, and Gaia gets to decide, you know, what stays and what goes, not because either thing is less than worthy or anything like that, or that we're inferior, but that, you know, there's a beginning and an end. As Scripture likes to say, you know, there's a time for
Mhm.
an opening and a closing, you know, time for a season, everything under the sun. And so I think what's happening is we're realizing that we're taking this very troublesome and troubling time, and and it is those things, but it's also a transition time. It's a very troublesome transition, but it's a very real transition, and I think we're moving into that awareness, and our stress is turning into stretch. Um,
Mm, mm.
and I think it's and again, it's really troublesome. I mean, like, especially if you're in the midst of it, you know. But that's what's happening, and I think if we can give ourselves enough credit to say we've come this far, and we've accomplished way more than we realized, um,
Mm.
we can really um, put those feelings of overwhelmness and those feelings of, you know, what's happening, of total powerlessness, into their proper place, and know that they're real and that they're valid, but that there's a song here that we're a part of. There's a dance here that we're dancing into,
Mm.
um,
Mm.
you know. And so yeah, but you know, you said something really cool that Spirit obviously wanted to manifest, because you talked about, you don't know if you're a flea or a nail or whatever. It's so funny that you say flea, because I was just texting a friend of mine who's a therapist, and she and I are very, very close friends. And we have this joke that we call each other fleas on the thighs of life.
That's great. That's great.
And it was just so funny that you brought that up, because I was just texting her, and that's what we always call ourselves. And so sometimes when we end our messages, we'll say, like if one of us has to go, we'll say, okay, I gotta go. This flea needs to start hopping again.
That's great. That's great. Well, yeah, and who knows, what my purpose is on the greater Gaia. I mean, just to, like, we don't have to know that. We don't have to know the outcome. Just have to know what we're called to do and how we're called to share in this moment. And it's interesting talking about the Gaia concept and the one body concept when I've already talked about body wisdom. And I don't think I've always put those back to back in a conversation so quickly. So now I'm kind of wondering about that whole, if I have wisdom of my body, then that's what my goal is in terms of my relationship with Gaia, the right relationship, what Judeo-Christian tradition calls righteousness, that right relationship that Native Americans and other indigenous peoples talk of, that's my body wisdom. My body wisdom tells me that we're connected because I can feel it, I can experience it. It's part of the data that I take in, and it's part of the information that can guide me, is that connection. So, Jewish scriptures, Hebrew scriptures talking about, what's going to affect the 7 generations and what have the 7 generations before affected us now. Of course, that's a Native American kind of wisdom from several tribes, I believe, several nations speak of that 7 generations. And so, that perception of this is my place in the web, this is my place in the relationship.
Yeah. And it makes me wonder, I'm like, what is the body wisdom that Gaia has? Well,
it's interesting because one of the things that I've been thinking about doing is actually studying a little bit of permaculture as it relates to spiritual path. And I've looked at that a little bit, actually, from an InterPlay friend in Northern California. But I know some other people that are teaching that now, and I'm thinking about looking into that. So to get the wisdom of the permaculture tools and apply that to my soul work and my life, I think is something interesting people are doing now.
Yeah, one of our favorite people, Starhawk, does that. She teaches that. Yeah. I had a really wonderful 3-day experience with her on a retreat that she led, and that was the first time I met her in person, and I got to spend extended periods of time with her, and I remember thinking, it was the first day, and we were all walking outside into this, it was in upstate New York, and it was at a retreat center that had this really wide open campus with a lot of trees and nature and things. So we went out into the back to where there was this open area, and it was just absolutely gorgeous, and the sun was out, and the birds were chirping and everything. And then when we were walking out, or no, it was actually the opposite. It was really windy and cold and kind of overcast when we were walking out, and we were all out there for about 10 minutes or so before she came out to join us. And I remember noticing that as soon as she walked out, the entire environment changed.
Wow.
And it went from overcast to shining, and the birds were coming out, and the wind died down. And I was like, oh, wow. I was like, this woman has a lot of power.
That's great. Yeah, yeah.
Uh, and so I immediately was a fan. Well, I was already a fan, but I was like immediately impressed. And I just thought, wow, whatever she's got, I want some of it. But you know, regards to like art and ritual and wisdom, body wisdom, you know, she led us in a guided meditation. I don't remember if it was that same day or the next day, but and she was drumming the meditation, and it was about going into, it was a visioning exercise, and we were trying to vision what the world would look like in 10, 15, 20 years,
Mm.
um, which seemed to be quite hard when we were first beginning to start it. And I was like, oh, I don't know what I'm gonna see. I don't even know if I'll see anything.
Mm. Yeah.
As I sat down and we were all sitting, you know, in different, we kind of all spread out. And I sat on the floor because I like to sit on the floor when I do meditations. And she started drumming. And as soon as the first beat hit, I completely went into a different world. Uh,
Mhm.
and that was the first time that had ever happened to me. I usually have very subtle mystical experiences.
Mm.
Um, they're not very dramatic. And but I remember I went into a different realm, and I was there for quite an extended period of time. And what I suddenly realized when I came out of it was I was transported into the womb of the divine feminine.
Mm. Wonderful.
And I got a clear, I didn't get a picture of what the world would look like, but I got a sense that uh, the world that is to come has to first be uh, incubated.
Mm. Mhm.
That,
Mhm.
that it's not, we're not arriving to it, we're becoming it.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That
Mm,
really does. In terms of all this, we're all one together in unity, and so we really, considering all the differences and all the diversity and all the complexity, we'd have to go through a transformational process in a womb-like experience or in some kind of cocoon or something, to break down. One of our other, and I don't know that Paula Lucia Bishop, but she's a CS person that was on the Creation Spirituality Communities board,
mm,
and she loves talking about caterpillar soup when the
mm,
when the imaginal cells call the caterpillar to weave the cocoon and be in the cocoon, and then it dissolves in the caterpillar soup, and it really has no idea that it's going to emerge to be a butterfly, and
mm.
yet it has within it those imaginal cells that have that possibility. I'd like to think that's where we are now, even with all our difficulties, even with all the pandemic and Black Lives Matter protest and the Poor People's Campaign. I'm guessing you're aware of that movement and
Mhm.
all the things that they lift up in a systemic confluence of problems that we have to address all at once.
Yeah.
Um, in their perspective, yeah, we need to have that. The thing I love about and I'll come back to InterPlay because we keep coming back to body wisdom, in whether it's in the micro or the macro level. Um, the InterPlay wisdom is we go the speed of the body, the speed of nature. And when we don't go the speed of the body or the speed of nature is when we get out of sync, when we get in trouble, when we're just thinking with our head and we're pushing my ideas, our ideas, instead of coming up with that connected, related, earthy, grounded um, transformation that comes forth, yes, from a vision, but it comes forth from the imaginal part of the vision, not the reptilian part of the brain or even the mammalian part of the brain, but it comes forth from the frontal lobe, curiosity and imagination, which is what so many artists create with. It's that. Yeah. And it's that creating where you don't really know what the future is. You're just coming forth with, I'm going to take this next step, or I'm going to play with this, medium, whether it's paint or community, whether it's church or gardening. I'm going to play with it
Yeah.
and see what comes of it.
Yeah, and in Matt Fox, we mentioned Matt. I work with him, and we have good relations with him. And he, in his most recent book on Thomas Aquinas, he actually put in there a line that Aquinas talks about. Playfulness and fun are virtues.
Yeah.
And I had never heard or read Aquinas actually say that. And I thought, oh, well, that's good to know.
Well, Matt can lift up those things. I swear. Yeah, I will have read something, and whether it's Howard Thurman or one of the mystics, one of the more ancient mystics, he will lift up things that I miss. So
Yeah.
good at that. Good at, yeah.
Yeah, I was just so happy I saw that. I thought, well, great. That's what we need. And that's part of the reason why I love creation spirituality, and I love interplay and art. When I was a kid, I was very sickly. I was born with a genetic birth defect that really was very, very traumatic, and and yet we teach in creation spirituality that the second path, the via negativa, was what we sometimes call the dark night of the soul, or the what I like to call the shadow realm. Is really, it's not an absence of, but it's a spaciousness that allows you to push away all those things that hinder your ability to create. As we know, we talked about each one of the paths gives birth to the next path, and within each one of them is the next one and the preceding one. So out of the negative path comes the creative path, the via creativa. And I really do think that because I was born into a body that medically, according to medical ideology and terminology, is compromised, I like to think of that as an opening for creativity to flow. And when I was a kid, I had to undergo a lot of operations, and the way I look now is much different than I used to look. And I have ongoing things that I have to deal with because of it. But one of the ways that I learned to cope and to find my way of moving in the world was through music, through art. Art specific, generally, but music specifically. I started out singing as a choir boy when I was 5, which was a shock to my doctors because they didn't think I would be able to do that, because one of the byproducts of the condition I have is you have hearing issues, which I've never had, and you tend to have speaking issues with the muscles in your jaw and things like that, which I've never had, obviously. And so I asked my mother one day, I said, hey, I want to sing in the school choir. Can I do that? And she's like, yeah, go ahead. So I started going to the practices, and I ended up actually being told by my music director to apply for the Houston Boys Choir, which was a very prestigious thing to do. I ultimately didn't do it, but it was a compliment. It was her way of trying to empower me. And then when I turned 8, I was like, I want to be able to play what I'm singing and play while I'm singing. So I started learning piano. And to this day, I always say my safest place and my most sacred place are at the piano keyboard. Because I just feel, I get to enter into a realm that is just so precious and beautiful and filled with all these sounds and colors and vibrations. And it's very healing. And also, you were talking about just being that imaginative part of our brain that artists use. That's very true, because every time I hit a key on the piano, especially if I'm improvising off of a tune, which I like to do a lot. I don't know what I'm gonna play after I play that first note. Um,
Mm.
I just have to be like, okay, what direction am I gonna go? And then go and see how it turns out. And it always turns out to be something wonderful. Um, but it's just the not knowing. And actually every time you press a key, there are more than just the tone that you're hearing. There's actually overtones, which are smaller
Mm.
tones that are in the vibration,
Mm.
in the ether. um, and they say that that's actually subconsciously is what is triggering your mind when you're improvising. Your inner ear is hearing those overtones.
Oh, wonderful. Hmm.
And so anyway, I just thought that was a I just wanted to share that. I don't remember what my
Yeah,
point was.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's fascinating. So, as I hear you talking about this, and I've played around a little bit with instruments and singing, but I don't have anywhere the skill level or training you do. But when I hear you talking about that, I can kind of imagine, that when we're thinking we're going to create something, especially if we think, we've got the arrow and we're going to, like this is the target that I'm going to hit, then, we've got this tight focus, and that would be on the main note we think we're hitting. But then it's really the overtones that bring it the fullness and bring out the rest of it. And so in InterPlay, we talk about easy focus, where we're aware of the perceptions in the room. So many of us have been doing these Zoom calls and Zoom meetings, and we're kind of like focused on the computer. And yet, if you and I were hanging out in the room in person, we would probably be looking out the window, we'd be noticing art in the room, or, something else going on around in our space. And we wouldn't always be so tightly focused on the screen. And that's part of what people need these days, is to lighten up, even when we're in front of the screen, to relax and not have that tight focus. When we're talking about, I think, and this is sort of, I guess this is my body wisdom speaking, as well as perhaps my approach to spiritual practice, which, I could say a little bit more about. But when we're looking at the horizon, the future we want to create, I think we need that easy focus. The easy focus allows for other perspectives more easily. It's not like
Mm,
my way is the right way. I've got it. It's this way. And the easy focus keeps us more centered in our bodies and more aware of our heart, mind, body, spirit connection, as well as how our bodies in relationship with the rest of surroundings, people, and creation. And so that it's more comprehensive and open, like you talk about, not just the one note, the one sound, but the overtones are being experienced in that beginning note. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I love that. Yeah, my cousin who lives with us, she's a yoga instructor, and she's also a meditation teacher. And I like when she does her meditation, she often invites you to soften your gaze.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and I
yeah.
just love that. Yeah, I think it's a good reminder. We don't have to be so, uh, you know, everybody's a mystic, everybody's an artist, everybody's a prophet. Um, and we certainly have one of those, or that we fall into more often. But we also have to remember the other two that are there,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
mingle with them, and dance with them, and play with them, and and just we can be the prophet, and we can be the one who projects and who is very fierce about um, deconstructing what doesn't work, but we also have to be constructing what will work, and,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
what our bodies know to be working. And I like in my nonviolence trainings, when I teach nonviolence, I talk a lot about the two hands of nonviolence, which was invented by Barbara Deming. Um, and she says that, in one hand, we need to say no, no to the world that is violent, to the world that's patriarchal, misogynistic, harmful in every way, because we have to set the boundary. We have to design the container. Otherwise, we won't be able to say, but yes to your ability to be compassionate. Yes to the fact that we're upset with each other, but we're upset because we think highly of each other and we want the best from each other. So no, you're not allowed to insult me, but yes, I'm inviting you in to a more healthy interaction, you know, and it can be applied to anything. But I do think that that is really what we have to cultivate. No is a complete sentence, but but
Yeah.
also yes is as well.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And that kind of, it's actually non-dualistic thinking, I think, is
Mhm.
how I perceive some of that. And certainly not, you know, the kind of one answer, one right way, you know, because it's, the body has more complexity than that. Our bodies know that other bodies and the relationship we have with other bodies and other beings and even physicality itself is just far more complex and quite frankly far more interesting.
Yeah.
I was talking with my husband yesterday and I was saying that some particular, you know, if I'm telling only this one portion of the story, he doesn't like lima beans, nor do I. And I said, that's the lima beans. I've only been talking to you about the lima beans, and there's so much more in the meal, and there's dessert, and there's this feast, you know, but that's the lima beans. And so I realized that I needed to be sharing more with him about the particular aspects of that work that I was doing. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I mean, some people may love lima beans, but it's the you know, only one way, one section, one slice that it's just not sustainable, quite frankly. You know, to have that monocrop and that, you know, mono food and yeah, far less flavorful, far less interesting.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, one of the awesome things about creation spirituality is it allows us to, you know, in regards to like not just having one, I think it allows us to have a format, a container, a rhythm or a recipe for allowing multiple traditions to play with each other.
Absolutely.
You
Yeah.
know, I have I don't know where I no, actually, I think I gave it away. I used to have this, this placard that says, praise well with others.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
had
That's
all,
right.
yeah, and it had all these little religious symbols on it and everything. I
Yeah.
thought, that's so cool. I love that. I wish we could
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
that more. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. I love the study of different spiritual paths and the interfaith tradition. And I found that as I really mature in that love of that and respect of that, I don't have to pretend that I am all those things. And that makes less cultural appropriation, of course, but it also means that I can share the wisdom, the different bits I know about those things. And I can say, well, you know, this is how I fit in the bigger body. This is my portion of the bigger body. And it's not an exclusive, this is the only way, but this is part of my part of the story that helps me to move through my day and my life, kind of thing.
mm,
Um, yeah, yeah.
yeah. Well, you know, we my train of thought went somewhere else.
Well, let me just say one more piece about that then, because you know, part of what I think is essential to me is as a person who's practicing a Methodist, United Methodist, and practicing Christian, I've always respected other religions, quite frankly, and been interested in them. And I have always had this sense of connection with the earth and I've had to develop, actually. I have had different smaller disabilities, but some health issues and some disabilities, and foot issues that have limited me in different times. And I just had that total ankle replacement, and so I'm definitely well aware of what it's like to have a body deal and a body issue with limits and with quirkiness or pain or whatever it is. And so where I'm going with this is, in spite of that, I think being embodied, like my spiritual path has to be embodied fully embodied. It has to be eco-spiritual. So that's where the creation spirituality comes in. And if not what some people would define as interfaith, at least a diverse and appreciation and allowing, like a mutual respect amongst practices, so that I pray well with others too.
I know, it's great and it's fun. It makes, and also I think it's more honest, because I remember I watched I was with my godfather and we were watching an old Western, because he likes watching Westerns. And there was this one episode, and it was based in Hawaii. And there was this minister, I think he was Baptist, and he was sent with his congregation from his denomination to go to Hawaii, and to minister to the indigenous folks there, and particularly one of the indigenous men who was actually studying as a seminarian to be ordained with that denomination, whatever it was. And because of the time frame, it was, I think, in the 1800s or something like that, I don't remember, but anyway, but because of the time frame, and because the guy was indigenous, they were basically never going to ordain him. He was certainly theologically more mature than this superior, and more connected with spirit, and but because he was a brown man, and because he was a part of a culture that was considered deviant, they basically were just kind of like bringing him along. They were just pulling on his collar and never really recognizing him. This minister ended up actually kind of, because the community has as their part of their culture to be open and welcoming, and they honor the wisdom of every person. So they wanted to learn from this guy, and including the queen, because it was a matriarch society. So the queen said, come teach me, be my spiritual teacher. And so she would meet and all of them, and like a lot of indigenous folks, when the white man came, got sick because they didn't have immunity. Well, ultimately, I can't remember what exactly happened, but the queen lost the love of her life, and died. He died, and she got really sick afterwards from a broken heart, and she died from a broken heart. Well, then the entire community got sick with this with smallpox, I think, or fever or something, and they all eventually decided, went kind of mad because of the condition, and so they went and they jumped into the water because they were all so warm, and they thought that would cool them off. But it caused hypothermia, and they all passed on. But anyway, that was a long way of saying I was watching this with my godfather, and we were both kind of commentating on the grotesque things that this minister would say to these really kind people. And at one point he called them, he said, your way of life is savage, and you need to be disciplined and learn the right way of being a human. And I looked at my godfather, I was like, their tradition is probably thousands of years older than Christianity, and he has the audacity to say that they're savage. Like, what in the world?
Mhm.
So
Mm.
I say that as a way of saying, I really think that there are religions out there that are older than Christianity, and how dare we think that we have all the answers? It's like, what?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That could be a story in many different cultures
Oh yeah.
around the world. Yeah. 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 I've had the blessing to live, in Hawaii and studied with some indigenous elders there, and lived in Alaska and studied with some Alaska Native people. So a little bit there, not as much as Hawaii. Hawaii was a longer period of time and more intensely and directly. And Alaska was 3 years, not so long. So anyway, but I've certainly heard some of those stories directly.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, we're coming towards our end. We're rolling towards it, but I want to kind of give you the mic, and in this last few minutes or so, and say whatever is on your heart. If you have a project that you're working on that you want people to tune into, or just if you have a word, a blessing, a song, or whatever you want to share.
Yeah. Oh, good. A word of blessing, a song. That's a great idea. Well, I think one of the most exciting things that I've been working on and working with you on is the Creation Spirituality Community Gathering that we are planning on hosting, not only to honor Matthew Fox, but to honor the teachings of creation spirituality. He'll be 80 this December, but to honor that teachings and practice. So some of our wisdom elders, we plan, Joanna Macy hopefully, and has said yes, and Brian Swim has said yes, and Starhawk, if the dates work out, has said yes. And so I'm excited about that. What really excites me, it's kind of funny, but like part of what just juices me up about that is that it came to me in a spiritual vision experience, that it's about falling in love with the earth and falling in love with each other. And as I was just sharing that with the group you're on, that became the title. Yeah. So I think that's the work before us, is falling in love with each other, and that kind of love that has that more open perspective, rather than I want this from you, and if you can't give me this, or if you can't behave this way, it's that unconditional love and presencing, and that right relationship we've been talking about. So that really excites me. In light of that, I think I'll offer a Hawaiian chant as our closing. This was taught to me, I shouldn't say it's not just gifted, it's Kumu Keala Chains. And it is loosely translated as Mother, Father, God, Mother Earth, and Father Sky. And it's a prayer for not only the tactile vision, but the higher vision, and the deeper purpose, the passion, and then for the power, which isn't just our individual power, but our communal power and our spirit blessed and strengthened power. O me kaike ike papalua. O me kai ini papalua. O me kamana mana papalua. O me Oh, my kapapalua.
Aho.
Yeah.
Man. Well, that was
Hawaiian begins their chants with Aola, which is let it fly.
oh, that's
Let it fly.
that's beautiful. Oh, that's great. Well, let's let it fly,
Yeah.
and fly into the beautiful everything that's going to be. Yeah, amen.